What the hell? It's JLL coming at you with Gnostic intel on the internet. It's January 8th, 2018, and today marks the beginning of an 8-day countdown to the performance of the ritual courting for the Charlotte working. That courting will be performed at 15 hours UTC on Tuesday, the 16th of January. UTC refers to Universal Time Coordinated. You use Universal Time so that you can coordinate from your local time to the exact moment of this ritual courting. In that way, you can bring your attention to it at the moment it's being conducted. Now bear in mind that the ritual courting, the Kalika Lethal Strike, is just a component of the killing spell. It's the trigger of the spell. But if you hold out your hand and I just put the trigger of a gun into your hand, well, you can't do anything with the trigger alone, can you? It's just a piece of metal. So the trigger of the gun has to be inserted in the gun has to be loaded, and it has to be aimed at the target. Those are the components of the spell. Nevertheless, the moment of the conducting of that rite is something that requires your attendance. So I advise you all to look carefully at your local time and then look forward to 15 hours universal time on that date, January 16th, so that you will know the moment in your local time when the courting is being constructed. Now, I don't advise you to spend much time in attendance to that moment. You have an exact moment, and I would say choose as you will, depending on the corresponding time in your local time zone. You might be occupied, you might be at work, you might have something to do at that time of day. It doesn't matter. You don't have to stop at that time of day and at that moment to bring your attention to the execution of the killing spell through the courting. You can do as you like. Don't get fancy about it. You can keep it simple. It's better to keep it simple. For instance, I don't advise that anyone do a courting simultaneously with the one that Tesca will construct on that day at that moment. Not at all. You can do courtings for the rest of your life if you want to, but on this occasion, it's not required. What is required is probably, 20 minutes of your attention, 10 minutes going into that exact moment, and 10 minutes coming out of that moment. Now you can devote more time to it if you wish. If you happen to be free during that time of day, wherever you are, you might want to concentrate for an hour, as you like. I advise you, however, not to concentrate by way of doing any kind of meditation. Meditation is not part of practice in planetary tantra. Meditation is excluded from Gaian tantric magic and practices in general. Meditation is masturbation. Meditation is completely useless for the purposes of handling power along the lines that I describe here. Now, there's a possibility that the time of the performance of the ritual courting could be in the middle of the night. So you might normally be asleep at that time. What can you do if that's the case? Well, you might set an alarm to wake yourself up at that moment and to be awake for half an hour around that time. But you don't necessarily have to do that. If you know that you're going to be asleep at the designated moment, the designated hour, well, then just carry the intention to attend to the ritual into your sleep. Have it be the last thought, the last desire that you entertain before you fall asleep. And I assure you that there are some of you who are ready, willing, and able to participate in this ritual who will do just fine by joining in your sleep. So there are various ways to approach this event and to assure that you will bring your attention to it concurrently and simultaneously with the moment of the ritual. Now, I'm pretty sure that those of you who are in on this adventure so far are becoming more and more keenly aware of the subtlety and complexity of a tantric spell. The construction or composition of a tantric spell involves intricacy and subtlety. And there is delight in constructing such a spell. The delight of playing a game. It's a game that involves life and death. It's a game that is calculated to change the fate of the human species. You're involved in a game to change the fate of the human species. How many specimens of the anthropos are living on the planet today? What, 6, 7 billion? So what am I talking about? Is that the human species? Well, that's the human herd. Let's call it the herd. And among that herd of human animals, well, what do you have? Well, you've got the people of the pork. And they're kind of in a class by themselves, but that's not my fault, is it? They put themselves in a class by themselves due to the designation of their totemic animal. They are identified, self-identified, by their totemic animal, which is the pig. And the rule that it is forbidden to eat pig, to eat pork, simply verifies that they are people of the pork. You see? Isn't that odd? It's also kind of odd that one of the overseeing powers of this ritual is none other than Miss Piggy, the Diamond Sow, who is Tantra Mother, she who leads you to and through release from pretending. You know, Mythophrenia, which I'm showing you in action, as you know, all the time with every word, Mythophrenia is nothing if it's not a play in polysemous and polyvalent images, words, symbols, signs, tropes, and allusions. In the art of Mantique, you practice the Mythophrenic fugue. Remember, this goes back to the early days of the Gnostic investigation of the Mandela effect. You practice the mythogenic or mythophrenic fugue, mythogenic, you can call it that as well. And the mythophrenic fugue consists of a medley of different elements, rather like the ingredients and spices of a lavish meal. And these components are elements in your own endopsyche. These components are elements that operate in the flux of your inner life, your endopsyche, your imaginative life of memory, reverie, and creative imagination. So you can expect that there will be multivalent or polyvalent markers in the game that you're playing. Getting back to the human herd, the human population on the planet. Okay, literally speaking, there are some 6 or 7 billion individual human animals. Well, I advise you to bear in mind that not all those human animals in the herd actually carry, embody, or represent what has been quaintly called humanity. No, humanity is it's a double entendre. You can say humanity consists in totality of the 6-7 billion people living on the planet today. Well, yeah. But humanity, by another definition, is a quality. It's a moral quality. I would say spiritual, but I don't use that word anymore, as you know. So humanity is a quality of those animals. Do you have any humanity? Sure, you belong to the herd of humanity, but do you exhibit humanity? You see the difference between those two terms? And there's an essay on medhistory.org called Children of the Damned, in which I discuss this matter. The brutal fact is, my friends, that the great number of human animals living on the earth today don't have humanity. So the fate of the human species depends upon those who do. And all the rest are rubble. Unless they happen to be attracted to go along with the pack. Now there are pack animals like dogs and wolves, and there are herd animals. The Kalika warriors are pack animals, and the trope or allusion for them is the wolf pack and the parable of the wolves. So when you become a Kalika warrior, when you undertake the practice of planetary tantra along the lines that it's going here, well, you select yourself into a pack and you deselect out of the herd. And it just so happens, and I think this is really deeply and profoundly true, whether it is or not, I guess will be proven in the immediate time ahead, certainly in the next year or two, certainly by 5 years from now. What I say here will be proven or not. But the only way for the human species to come into correction is not through a collective mindset change in the herd. It's through the action of the packs, the wolf packs. And then the herd will follow the pack. And that is the way that change can happen for this species. Now, if you bear in mind this distinction between the herd, or the masses, the demos, and the pack animals, then I think it's fairly obvious that the current adventure of the Charlotte working would be a subject of conversation, certainly to those who are involved in performing it, you and I. But inevitably, it will become, and may already be, a subject of chatter in the herd. Okay? Now remember, the spell is not over on January 16th. That is the signal moment when the spell is cast. At that moment, the sorcerer who conducts the spell in the form of a ritual courting does not determine the exact time of death of the target. Bear that in mind as well. Go and review the details of the procedure if you need to. Watch the video of the Kalika Lethal Strike. There you see it explained very clearly that the sinker hangs in the wind. It carries all the tension of the cording, and it pulls on the drawing string until the moment when the rusty nail is toggled out of the cording. And when the nail hits the ground, the sinker hits the ground. And that is the moment that the spell is cast. So the spell is set, and then the spell is cast by the power of the earth itself. These are precise and meticulous details of Gaian sorcery, and you may enjoy them as much as you like. They are there to be enjoyed. They are there to be relished. They are there to bring you delight and enchantment. And the more enchantment and delight you feel, and the greater the sense of mischievous play that you acquire in this practice, the more effective the practice will be. So, chatter in the herd. Chatter in the herd about the Charlotte working. Well, I don't know. Who knows how this is going to play out? Who knows who's going to pick up on this and start talking about it and speculating about it? Those who are outside the intimate circle of the operation itself. So within the wolf pack of Kalikas, within the 16-strong support team, and also within the realm of the ground force, and that's you out there, well, you'd be talking about this operation. And the way that you talk about it has to be different from the way that it comes to be talked about in the world at large. It is imperative that you realize the difference here. And my purpose in this talk, which won't be a long one, is simply to clarify that difference. Now, I used for the title of this talk, The Power of Silence, and that's the name of a book by Carlos Castaneda, which was actually published in 1987. That's exactly 30 years ago. I have my copy right here. Copy of the 1987 edition. And it's falling apart, it's falling out of its binding. It has a number of places where I've marked the pages, the titles of the chapters, the requirements of intent, handling intent. There's a great deal in the Neo-Toltec sorcery of Castaneda that holds up very well in planetary Tantra. So if you haven't read this book, or if you haven't read anything at all by Carlos Castaneda, it might be a place to start, but it's not required. The power of silence is, however, required. So what is the power of silence? Well, it's the title of a book by Carlos Castaneda, published in 1987. It's also a dynamic factor in your intimate connection to Sophia. There is a Gnostic text which says that her name is silence. I explained in the essay, and maybe there was an audio that went along with it, I can't remember. It's all in Mythophrenia, if you want to go back there and dig it out. Her name is silence. I explained that it doesn't mean that you call her silence like you would call a dog Susie. Hey, Susie, come over here. You know, that's how you call the dog named Susie, right? Hey, silence. No. Her name is the act of silence. Okay? Take that one on board. In the composition of the Charlotte working, the act of silence plays a key role. So let me explain to you exactly how. As I do so, bear in mind that silence does not mean secrecy. It doesn't mean withholding anything or tricking and manipulating people by what you don't tell them or what you don't say. Gaian Tantric magic is transparent, clean, and impeccable. And along this practice, consistent with this practice, you do not meddle in any of that kind of stuff, any manipulation, any deceptive trickery. But there is trickery, but it's open and transparent trickery. Power of this magic consists in very, very great measure on its transparency. That's a point that ought to be coming more and more to realization in your minds as the adventure unfolds. Now, what I'm talking about here gets closer and closer to a delicate matter, which is, of course, the choice of the TI, target identity, of a killing strike, and the disclosure of that choice. This is a delicate matter. And you really have to ask yourself, if you're sober and you're rational in coming along with me on this adventure, you've got to say, well, how the fuck does one do that? How do you choose the target? And how and to whom do you disclose the target identity? And when? Now, there are a lot of questions floating around here, I know that. And I advise you just to let these questions float. The primary thing for you to bear in mind right now is that the Charlotte working is a novel, unique event of inception. It's an event of inception of Gaian Tantric magic. There can only be one event of inception. Following this event, which is in certain respects a kind of test run, depending on the results of this event, you, each one of you, can undertake Gaian Tantric magic following the intentions that you choose. And if you would continue from this point on to choose to perform a killing spell and do according, then you can do so. But no matter what you do in the future, you need to consider the questions that arise around this topic of the TI, the target identity. Now you'll notice that in the video on the Kalika Lethal Strike, you find the tablet. The tablet is a component of the strike. What is the tablet? It's a clay plaque or tablet that contains the imprint of that specific nail to be used for the cording. It contains the name of the target, the birth date of the target, and then it contains also the thumbprint of the sorcerer who is executing the spell, and it should also contain the date that the spell was conducted. Now, if you take a photograph of that plaque, including beside it a picture of the target, then you have a record of the intention of a killing spell executed through cording. Do you see that? Now, is that how this current inceptive case is going to be conducted? Not exactly, because this current case is a special case, being the first of its kind. Also, you need to bear in mind that, and this is pretty wild, but hang with me here. You need to bear in mind that there is the potential for a lot of fakery around what I'm describing. A lot of false claims could possibly arise among demented people who want to present themselves as practitioners of Gaian Tantra who have successfully conducted a killing spell. Can you see that coming? So how are you going to know the genuine cases when the killing spell has actually worked as intended? From false claims and pretenses and pretending and all kinds of nonsense that may, in the course of time, gather itself around this ritual or around public knowledge of this ritual. Get my drift? Let me give you a quick example. I saw recently, a couple of days ago, that this man called Peter Sutherland had died. Now, Peter Sutherland, I think, was a member of Parliament, MP of the European Union, from Ireland or something like that. Anyway, there's a clip on YouTube, which has been widely circulated, that shows Peter Sutherland sitting at some meeting in some cabinet capacity, and he openly declares to the white European races of today that they are going to be terminated, and it's over. Peter Sutherland exhibits threat display, and he does it in a disgustingly arrogant manner of entitlement, as if he calls the shots for where humanity is going. When I saw this clip coming from Peter Sutherland some years ago, I really wanted to murder this creature. I don't know what to call him. This pathetic Shabbos Goy serving the Zenosh program of master race genocide. I really wanted to fucking murder him. I was seriously thinking of going to Ireland or wherever he was to be found, going into some seedy pub and getting a gun and killing him in cold blood. I hated him so much for what he said. I hated him for his blatant, arrogant proposal of this agenda of destruction of the white European races. Now, it's possible that I could have done a lethal strike on Peter Sutherland. So suppose now, today, when he died a couple of days ago, suppose 2 or 3 days after he died, well, lo and behold, what happens? Well, John Lash posts on the internet a picture of a plaque showing the name of the target, his birth date, side by side with a picture of him taken off the internet, and the date of the courting ritual at the bottom of the plaque, as ought to be properly done. The plaque ought to have the birth date of the target identity under the name of the target identity at the top, and at the bottom, next to the thumbprint, should have the date that the courting was executed. And I could put all that on the internet and I could say, look, here, that's proof. I did this courting on such and such a day. Here's the record of it. And now he's dead. So I take responsibility for having killed Peter Sutherland, you see? And that's all fake and make-believe. And anyone could fake that. Bear in mind that anyone can fake a killing spell and falsely claim to have succeeded in such a spell. Now, there's nothing anyone can do about that. If this guy in tantric magic gets to be propagated in the world and it comes to be seen that it actually works, there is bound to be a certain amount of fraud, substitution, and fraudulent claims around it. Do you see what I'm getting at? Well, there's nothing that can be done about that, but those who participate in the genuine rituals can preserve the integrity of what they do in a particular way. How do you do that? Well, you use the power of silence or silent knowing. The rule here is a simple one. It may happen that some people, and perhaps many people, will chatter about a killing spell that has been announced to the world at large, and the target of that spell. But those who are seriously engaged in conducting it don't chatter at all. They remain in silent knowing and never say the name of the target. Ever. And I mean ever, for the rest of your life. If you know the name of the TI, that is a name never to be pronounced aloud for the rest of your life, even to other intimate members of the Kalika party. Those who are in the 16-strong support team, for instance, all know the TI, and they don't say that name. So I extend to you in the ground force the same Kalika rule. Well, you might then wonder, naturally you're going to wonder, well, how do those who participate in this spell concentrate on the TI if they don't know the name? Well, of course, you have to know the name, you just don't pronounce it. And how do you know the name? You know it through a device of shamanism, an ancient shamanic tool, which has often been overlooked by those who practice shamanism today. You know, there's been a huge revival of shamanism on the planet. It's very chic now to play around with shamanism. Certainly, Carlos Castaneda had a lot to do with laying the foundation and setting the direction for this shamanic revival. And you hear all kinds of stories and all kinds of proposals and instructions and rules and practices and rituals associated with these shenanigans, as I call them. But there's one factor that was absolutely essential to indigenous shamanism going back thousands of years that you don't hear about. And what might that be? What might that be, you ask? Well, it's the riddling rhyme. Among the skalds of Iceland, among the various bards in the Welsh and Celtic traditions, the riddling rhyme or riddling verse was a well-known part of the repertoire of the shaman poet. Now, there's a particular archaic word. I believe it comes out of the Icelandic background, Finnish Icelandic tradition, although they are distinct, they contain certain overlapping elements. This word is kenning, Kenning. Have you ever heard of a kenning? Well, a kenning is a riddling verse or a clue. It is an item of shamanic intel encoded into a rhyme or verse or into an enigmatic phrase. That's a kenning. In the Charlotte working, there is a kenning for the TI. And it goes like this. Mirror, mirror in the skies, who's the author vile of lies rolled across the child's bright brow as countermagic to the diamond sow? This kenning has 7 lines, and those are the first 4 which go together. You do not write down these lines. You simply repeat them from memory. Mirror, mirror in the skies, who's the author vile of lies rolled across the child's bright brow as countermagic to the diamond sow? Now there are 3 additional lines, making a total of 7 lines in this kenning. Here are the 3 additional lines. Do not write them down. 2 court cards pull her name in tow. Her 7 spells stand in a row. By strangulation does she go. So there's a total of 7 lines in the kenning that encodes the TI for the Charlotte working. Is that clear? Can I be any more clear? And those of you who hear my words in the ground force and who choose to engage in this spell, come to know the name of the target from the kenning, and you never say that name. Well, obviously you have a big clue here, don't you? Because it is a woman. And so it is a woman's name. 2 court cards pull her name in tow. Now watch your phonemes. Watch your phonemes closely. Feel them in your throat. Feel the phonemes come across your tongue on the air coming out of your body when you recite these 7 lines. The phonemes begin after the first 2 lines. Remember Sophianic baby talk. I claimed in the Gnostic investigation of the Mandela effect that the Aeon Sophia actually has, extruded tendrils of the organic light into your neural network so that you are wired to her power and to her mind. The wiring is confirmed when you respond to phonemic cues. And as you see, as you hear, clearly, there are strong phonemic cues in this riddle. Mirror, mirror in the skies, who's the author vile of lies rolled across the child's bright brow as countermagic to the diamond sow? 2 court cards pull her name in tow. Her 7 spells stand in a row. By strangulation does she go. A second clue embedded in these lines is the manner of death that is wished upon the T.I. Strangulation. So you can be specific, and well, you damn well ought to be specific in casting any kind of spell with Gaian Tantric magic. And there are many other spells to cast. And I wish you all happy, happy lives of divine mischief and spell casting in the time ahead. But for right now, this spell is the test run. You all concentrate on this spell right here, right now. So I'll leave you with those thoughts. I'll leave you with that kenning or riddling rhyme. And I suggest, well, what can I suggest? I suggest the obvious, which is when you solve the riddle, you indicate it by an allusion. You do not write or pronounce the name of the T.I. Not doing so is an essential factor in the composition of the spell. Do you see that? So bear that in mind. In silence does the target stand, its name signaled across the land, spoken by some, to others mute. The spell includes this attribute. So heed the obvious, hold to correction. What's coming next is the app for you to use out there in the ground force to engage with the execution of this spell.